Welcome back to Why Blank Lost. I'm David Bloomberg, and while Rachel said that nobody can deny her rock draw was the worst case scenario, my co-host Jessica Lewis might just say there was one that was worse.
There definitely was one that was worse, and it was one that cost me $1 million. So, yeah, I tend to disagree with that statement. Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
Yes, that was
Just
a
a little bit.
very Rachel-centered quote.
Very Rachel-centered. Come on, Rachel, think of me. And
Yes,
think of the
yeah.
other individuals who had to go to rocks and have their games destroyed because of it. It's very sad.
Yes,
It's
but
very
mostly
sad.
think of you. Yes.
Yes, think of me.
Mhm.
Think of me kindly.
Yes.
Yes.
And of course, for those of you who are on video, you can already see, but those of you on audio cannot see that Jessica is actually playing the role of Jeff Probst today in honor of Halloween.
Yes, in the spirit of Halloween, I thought, well, I should rock a hat and a blue button-up shirt. So here I am playing my best Jeff Probst. So I highly doubt I will do as well as he often does, but we'll try. I will try.
Yes. For those of you who may not have seen it yet, I was on the RHAP Halloween week Brant Steele, where I was the evil wizard.
For those of you who don't see what he's doing, he has a magic wand.
Well, and I just made flame appear from nowhere. So
All the fun we have. Listen, I do
yes.
love Halloween. I really do. I think Halloween is great. And I'm very sad that my children are grown and no longer allow me to make their crazy costumes as I used to. So that definitely makes
I
me sad.
remember when
So
your daughter dressed up as you.
she did. That was so much fun. She
Yes.
had bloody, bleeding eyes in
Yes.
her survivor attire. It was great. What a good year that was.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Speaking of
But
that
yes.
rock draw, yes. Um,
Yeah, that whole thing. Bringing it
yes.
all back around, right?
Yes, yes.
But yeah.
But let's continue to move back around to my prediction last week because I said Tiana would get voted out.
Oh,
Ha!
oh.
And it happened in such a
Did you just
clear,
go, "Huh?"
yeah. It happened in such a clear and not at all convoluted way. It was obvious
Oh,
the whole
no.
time.
Oh, because I would like to remind you who my pick was. It was Rachel.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Isn't it
Well,
interesting that
too bad for
had
you.
too bad for the entire universe of Survivor lovers that have to watch all of these insane, whatever you wanna call them, it's
Oh, we'll get to
disadvantages.
that.
I
Yes.
know we will, but
Yes.
Rachel was my choice, and I'm sorry, but you ended up having your pick go home because of some convoluted, ridiculous
Now we're about to do
scheme.
a whole podcast about why my winner, my not my winner pick, why the person went home. It's not because of that. I mean, it is partially, but I
That is
think
I'm
she's
not
still.
saying it's all that, but
I
it's a
I
huge
do
part.
think, and we will obviously get into this. I do think because remember we made our predictions, without knowing what would
Oh, for
happen
sure.
fully.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
um, I do think there was a good chance she would have gone anyway, which we'll get
Mm.
into. Um,
Interesting.
so because that's why I made that prediction because
Alright, well,
obviously
we'll
all of my predictions are 100% correct. So
yeah, who was your winner pick
I mean,
again?
all of my predictions within the past week have been 100% correct.
Yeah, you're killing it out there. You're
Yeah,
doing a great
yeah,
job. Great job.
go me. Ah,
But yes,
um,
we do have a lot to discuss
yes,
about this particular episode and poor Tiana and how she ended up being sent home.
yeah, and we had talked previously about Annika's very real reaction to getting blindsided, and
Mm,
we again had an incredibly emotional exit here. In fact,
yeah.
as she was talking after Rachel left,
Mhm.
she was going on about how terrible it would be to leave at this point and everything else. It was very much foreshadowing. And it
Mm.
reminded me very much of, well, you. before the rock
Mm,
draw, when
yeah.
you talked about how upset you would be if you drew the wrong one. There
Mhm.
was a
Yeah.
lot of that same energy there.
Oh, goodness. Survivor can do some terrible things too emotionally, especially
Mhm.
when it's coming down to something like that. So,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
It's a tough time. Tough time.
Now, of course, no matter how a player reacts or how emotional they are upon leaving, we always figure out what they did wrong by following the same path. And we'll do it again here, comparing Tiana's game to my
Mhm.
rules for winning that I originally wrote way back after season one and have been updating ever since, using all the non spoiler information available to us from what we saw on TV, interviews, social media, and secret scenes. The newest version of the rules can, of course, be found on the website, robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed. But before we address how Tiana did in terms of the rules, we always have some other things to discuss from the episode. And you've already hinted at one of them
I
because
did.
although there are some very good reasons for the vote to have ended up the way it did,
Mhm.
which we will, of course, discuss, the fact that production made 8 of 12
I
people
know.
immune
Mhm.
is absolutely ridiculous and unacceptable. They
I agree.
need to let them play.
Yes, please let them play. Yes. Mhm. There's no reason to be adding these components when the players who are part of this game want to have a chance to actually come together, merge maybe, create some new relationships, form
Mhm.
some bonds, try to mix things up a little bit. We saw a lot of discussion being had amongst the women who wanted to come together and create an alliance. And it's so sad to see the what could have been be essentially like just taken away because they wanted to throw in this advantage and, as you said, literally make 8 people immune out
Mhm.
of 12. It's unnecessary, and I understand that they wanna mix things up and they wanna keep it
Yes.
fresh and different, but gameplay can be fresh and different. People can
Right.
backstab, people can scheme and plot. There's all of these things that they can do without having these
You
little
sound like
trinkets.
me in the TikTok discussion of
Uh,
where I said the
Crazy.
same thing and there's someone saying, "Oh, they need to make it interesting." Well, there are other ways to make it interesting,
Yeah,
you
let
know.
them play.
Yeah. And,
Mhm,
we will, as I said, discuss that the result can absolutely be explained. But the chances of getting a result like this, where we
mhm.
can say, here are all the reasons, they were not great. In fact, as soon as we saw the split on TV, Rachel tweeted at Dr. Christian Hubicki to ask him the odds of this exact thing happening.
Mm,
And he quickly responded to let her and everyone else know there was less than a 0.9% chance it would end up like this.
wow.
There was a much better chance of some weird random assortment of people who barely knew each other that could have resulted in someone truly getting screwed.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I don't like this at all,
No,
and I don't
and
like none of any of that.
yeah, and because of that, as part of this discussion, we need to bring back our Jeff Probst is wrong about blank segment. Because
Nice.
in the On Fire podcast, he talked about yes, you are wrong, Jeff Probst, on my screen
I
here.
am wrong.
Yeah, there we go. All right.
I
Uh,
should have never done that.
yeah, it's the first time we've ever heard him admit that.
I'm gonna
Um,
play this up.
in his On Fire podcast, he talked about the sharing of information when it comes to idols and advantages. And as part of that discussion, he said, what we've learned over the years is the format works. If you put interesting, compelling people on, let them play the game, we just keep following the story.
Yeah,
Now,
hi,
I
but you
know,
don't.
yeah, I know he wasn't talking specifically about the rock draw situation, but it's like he wasn't connecting the dots in his own brain. It's like, yes, Jeff, you have learned over the years that the format works. So
Mhm.
again, listen to yourself and let them
Yeah.
play the game.
And I will say that there used to be much more like drama surrounding the playing of an idol when it was so unexpected and there weren't a whole bunch of advantages floating around. Now everyone expects that there's like 3 that are just out there and that could be played at any minute. And so it really does take away the ability to just play the game. And I think the drama that comes along with playing an idol and saving yourself, saving someone else, and in those moments that we can all remember, those really intense gameplays, and Kelly Wentworth when she saved herself, and I mean there's some moment. I mean Russell Hantz when he was finding idols and playing, and no one knew that this was happening, and he was finding them just on his own because he was looking. All of those things, I think, have lent to the watchers of the show being really like, "Oh my god, this is so exciting." Now it's like, "Oh, here's another
I mean,
advantage. Oh,
it's
here's
kind
something
of
else."
like inflation,
Mm,
you know, it, it's what's a better way to say it? It's excitement inflation. Everybody used to get excited for one idol, but now it's
yeah,
like Jeff thinks you need 3 idols to do the work of
yeah.
one, or you need,
No,
and
yeah.
so yeah. Um, but I will say, speaking of idols, and there's a bit of a tangent, that I will say that even Jeff expressed astonishment about everyone sharing everything and said if
Yes, I
he were
did see that.
playing,
Mhm.
yeah, he said he wouldn't want to do that. So Jeff does agree with us sometimes, just not
Mhm.
on the important stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, people do need to stop sharing so much information in addition to, and Survivor stops needing to put so many advantages into the game.
Yes. Yeah.
See? Problem solved. Done and
Hmm.
done.
Yeah. Good job,
2
Jeff.
very easy things. Right. Listen, I'll work on it.
Hmm.
I'll talk to my people.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, moving to a couple other items from this episode, I want to mention the scene we saw of Genevieve and Andy coming together to form a duo at the beginning
Mm.
of the episode, or
Mhm.
near the beginning. Viewed in the context of the episode overall, it really didn't fit with anything that happened.
Mm.
So we have to ask ourselves, why was it there?
Mhm.
And mark my words, there was an important reason.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
I say that that reason is that these two are going far together.
Mhm.
Because, in the grand scheme of production, sometimes if a scene happens on one day, they may show it on another day if it fits better with the storyline.
Sure.
But this was too linked to what happened with Andy having been the backup vote. It wouldn't have made
Mhm.
sense to show it any other time. So if it was important to the future storyline, they had to show it in this episode when they did.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the key. They would not have shown this if it weren't important. So, people, when it turns out to be, remember, you heard it here first, or you saw me tweet about it or make a video about it first, because I
Or
did those too.
somewhere
Yes,
in the David Bloomberg universe of social media posting and podcasting, you said it first.
yes, exactly.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, and I am still astonished that Andy is doing as well as he is, considering where he came from, like, where this all started from. It's really amazing.
I said at the beginning, it wasn't a Banu situation; it was an Emily situation.
Yeah, it's really incredible, and he's really been able to figure it out, turn it around, and get a read on people,
Mhm.
and I really do think that he minimized any type of threat level that he had because of the initial blow up and how he was acting, and so no one was really worried about Andy. Well, they better be worried about Andy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Now, I also suspect Saul will be involved in that alliance somehow, since he already had something going with Genevieve, and we also saw Andy pushing him for an alliance after
Mm.
Saul admitted he voted for Andy. But I want to instead focus on Saul's incredible acting performance he did.
Oh gosh.
Um, because I do think that he fooled everyone as he sat there watching Rachel play this. Um, e- Even though he was using a technique that I have criticized myself when it comes to players on the traders and even in games of Mafia,
Mm,
where the guilty party pretends to not know what's going on as a cover. Like in
right.
traders, they'll be like, how many traders are there? Who's a trader? What do traders do? I have no idea. Yeah, that's because you're a trader. And in games of Mafia, they'll be like, Mafia? What's the Mafia? How many Mafia are there? What did you say, Game Master? I can't remember. It's like, okay, you're Mafia. Um, and I suppose someone could realize what he was doing and circle back later, but there was so much going on in that moment. I think it would be hard for them to focus just on him.
Oh, I think Genevieve was all over it.
I know that you and a couple other people have said or tweeted like, "Oh, that look," but that
Yeah.
was one look out of a long, you know, it
Yeah,
was
but she's a smart cookie. I just feel like she's paying attention, and I will say Saul was this whole episode was Saul centered, and I loved it, and it was fantastic. He was just a shining light and very enjoyable in every sense of the
like
word.
like the sun, which is also called
Right.
Soul, which is spelled the same as he spells his name. Yes,
Right.
shining
But
light.
what
It's
was
all
so
light.
funny about his reaction during that tribal was it was so unlike Saul. I feel like he was because it was so extra. Like Saul has never really been extra, and I was concerned with Saul at the beginning when he was with pregame interviews that he seemed a little um I don't demure, I guess. There was a quietness about him, and I was like, I don't know if he's really gonna be able to, like, get that oomph that he needs, and he's been kind of maintaining that, and it's been fantastic, like, it's really been working for
Mhm.
him, but then to watch him in that tribal, you're like, "Well, this is, like, a little bit extra Saul right now." So I don't know if
But they
anybody
all
picked up
were.
on
I
it,
mean, like, Sam was over the top, like, "Oh my god, what's going
but
on?"
right, but Sam is a little more like that, where I feel
True.
like, Saul doesn't usually present that way, but the facial expressions were hilarious. It was very, very entertaining and the just utter confusion, like, "What's going on? What does it say?"
Yes.
It's great. It was great.
Yes. I think that I think he'll let a few key people know.
And that's what I was
Um,
wondering is who is
yeah.
he going to share this information with, if anyone?
Yeah, originally, I was thinking, and I still think, that he would likely tell Rachel to try and gain some favor.
And that makes sense.
But on the know-it-alls, they talked about, like, if you're Rachel, while you can be thankful, does that mean you'd never take him to the end? I mean,
Ah,
David
I
played an idol on
mhm.
you. Would you have ever taken David to the end?
No, because I knew if
Yes.
I sat next to him, I was losing in 2
Right.
seconds because I owed my entire game to that man. So,
Right.
yes, I can understand that wholeheartedly, her not bringing him for that reason.
Yes. So I think he's going to want to gauge reactions and only tell those he believes are close allies.
Yes, but then we've also seen this entire cast likes to play telephone, so I'm curious if that would end up being shared with other people, even if he wanted to try to keep it tightly contained.
Yeah, we'll have to see. We'll have to see.
It would be interesting if he doesn't tell anyone makes it to the final 3, and then we finally get, like, a
Mhm.
final 3 reveal where it's like, "Hey, by the way, you know that thing? That was me."
Yeah.
And how that would end up affecting people who are on the jury because nobody I mean, Tiana's not on the
Right.
jury, so it's certainly not going to offend the person that
Mhm.
went home. So that would be interesting if we could finally get, like, a final 3 reveal like that.
Yeah. Now, speaking of Rachel, I do want to mention that she has apparently made quite an impression on the other tribes, or at least on Tuku, in just a couple days of merge. Because Gabe talked about her being very personable, very charismatic, and very smart. While Caroline said she was the most dangerous player in the game and connecting with everyone, even calling her the glue of the Gata tribe.
Mm,
Now, were both of them motivated to keep the target on Rachel when they were saying those things? Yeah, they were.
sure.
But nobody like looked at them and told them that they were crazy. Like
Yeah.
Tiana didn't respond and be like, "Who are you talking about?" You
Yeah.
know. Um, so other people must at least be mentioning it, even though we haven't seen it. I I, I don't know. I think it's something to watch for as we move forward.
Mm.
But it seems to be one of those classic Survivor tell, don't show, which is the
Yes.
reverse of what they should do. But they seem to be telling
Yeah.
us Rachel is doing all these things, even though we aren't necessarily seeing it.
And I'm wondering though if Tiana didn't want to really try to protect Rachel because she didn't want people to know that she was interested in working with Rachel because she was trying to form all women's alliance. And I'm
Hmm.
curious if maybe that was why she kind of minimized any type of response to that. But who knows? Again, if we didn't see all of it, maybe we didn't see her responding in that particular way.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Do you have anything or anyone else you want to discuss before we get to the rules?
No, I think you have touched upon everything that I felt I needed to speak on. So,
Okay. Well, there were, of course, some other things going on that I have already or will be putting in, my YouTube shorts at David Bloomberg TV, including, what we talked about in the intro, if Jessica gives me permission, to compare the two rock draws. Not to put you on the spot there, Jessica. I didn't mean to do that.
no, no, no. Listen, have fun with it. Do
Okay.
whatever you like. It would be okay.
All right. But before we get to how Tiana did, we do want to mention that the rules we're about to discuss come in a much
Mhm.
more colorful and shorter version in
Yes, they
poster
do.
form. You could go to robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed, scroll down to the poster, click on it, order it, and it will be sent to you. In addition to the poster, you can keep scrolling down and find the poster on a t-shirt
Mhm.
or the checklist on a t-shirt. And so again, that's robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed. And, just go crazy, order
Go
everything.
crazy. Buy it. Love it. It's great. I must say though, I'm always impressed. I know I've seen this for years at this point, but the poster really looks pretty badass, I must say. Like Eric did a great job with it. He really
He
did.
did. He
So,
really did.
it's phenomenal.
Yeah. All right. Well, as I said earlier, it's ridiculous that production set things up so only 4 out of 12 players were eligible to be voted out this week. However, even with that said, there are very good reasons Tiana was the target. And Rob even predicted in the know it alls that we talk about them. Indeed, in a way, we lucked out in terms of who was left to be potentially voted out. It wasn't a random assortment of people that could have gone in any direction. It was a whole tribe, and we know their past.
Mm.
Now, Tiana may not agree with the idea that this softens the blow, but I personally believe it's at least better to be voted out for a reason than to be voted out just because you happen to randomly be placed in a group.
Yeah.
And to be honest, that also makes it a lot more interesting for this podcast. um, but my point is that even though production really worked hard to screw someone over, random chance put Tiana's fate right where it had been before with her original tribe, which meant
Mhm.
that it was like traveling back in time to deal with where she stood and where she thought she stood with each of them. Sometimes the past comes back to haunt you.
Mhm.
Was that the case here, or were there new issues? At RHAP, we know Survivor, and we know why Tiana lost.
Mhm.
The first and most important rule is, of course, to scheme and plot. And Tiana was definitely doing that. The problem was that once again, we have a situation where other players were, well, doing it better. Uh,
Yes.
she believed she had an alliance with Kyle and Caroline, and even believed Sue was with her. And that's why she was so surprised and knew she was in trouble when Jeff read her name the second time, because the only one she expected should have come from Gabe. But all along, for days now, Caroline and Sue had been, to use her own word, bamboozling her.
Yes. And I really do think that the relationship that we've seen with Caroline and Sue really becomes so significant in these smaller sized tribes, right? Because two people can have a huge impact when you are not dealing with an
Hmm.
entire merged group like 12, right? When you're down to this smaller size, as the tribes were only six to start, and now we have five that have to vote. So it really does show how important it is to have that ride or die, to have that number two, because you never know if you're going to find yourself in a situation where it really is down to such a small number, four people that are eligible to be voted out. When you get to four and you have two people together,
Hmm.
you've almost got a majority, right?
Yeah.
So I really think that that too, unfortunately for Tiana, she didn't have that. She was
Well,
never
yeah,
able to
she
do that.
thought she did.
She
That's
thought
the
she did.
bigger problem is
Yes.
it's not only that she didn't have it, it's she thought she had it. She
Mm-hmm.
thought she easily had 3.
Yeah.
Um, and there was a trio in that tribe. It just didn't include her.
Right.
Um, and in addition to that, we of course saw Tiana, you mentioned it earlier, trying to help shape a cross-tribal women's alliance in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
And it's possible that would have helped her out if there had been a normal vote. But even then, it is clear that at least 2 of the women were not with her, especially since she wanted to use that alliance to go after Gabe.
Yeah.
So this is why I'm saying, even if it had been a normal vote, it still might have been Tiana. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and with the way the vote ended up, everything reverted back to the way things were going in the original Tuku, which was definitely not good for her.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting that she thought that she had such a close bond with Kyle, because I never really sensed that they were that close, but she really thought that they were, like,
I mean, Kyle
very
was the
close.
one who told her that Gabe was coming after her.
No, that's fair. Mhm.
She was with what she thought was the men, Kyle and TK,
Mhm.
originally till she turned on TK.
Right.
Um,
Which is
and that
why I thought it was strange that she thought, Kyle would just revert back to her.
Yeah, but also remember that that was how they knew for sure that Rome was lying, or at least exaggerating, was because he claimed that Kyle was saying these things about Tiana, which he
Mm.
partially was, but still, that was what Tiana thought about it. Was
Mhm.
so. It does lead us. I do think we should go back in time a little bit to see how things ended up this way,
Sure.
because when she flipped against TK, she was criticized by many people. And
Mhm.
I saw many of those same criticisms rising again when she was voted out. It might initially seem like there is some legitimacy to that criticism because, of course, that didn't really put her inside the core tribal alliance.
Mhm.
But I didn't buy that, and I still don't. Because can we really criticize someone? And this is a trick question because I know your answer, but can we really criticize someone for not wanting to risk a rock draw in the very first vote for their tribe?
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, that's ridiculous.
it is.
And she said in interviews that she was never going to do that. I think the bigger problem is that she believed once TK was gone, she was going to be in solid with Caroline and Sue and Kyle, not
Mm.
realizing that as much as the other 2 women talked about unity in the tribe, they didn't really mean it. Um,
No.
of course, she wasn't the first in the tribe to fall to this, as TK himself noted in his exit interviews that he didn't realize how close Gabe and Sue were. He saw Caroline and Sue as a pair, not the 3 of them as a trio. And Tiana was in the same boat, telling Mike Bloom, I didn't know how close Sue and Gabe were the entire time, that he
Mm.
had his 2 little birds that were basically keeping their eye on me.
Yeah.
Caroline in particular really played Tiana as Tiana never would have proposed to her that they vote out Gabe otherwise.
Yeah, and I do think that we saw a lot of that
Mm-hmm.
coming forward, like, the response that Caroline had to that vote, during that
Yes.
vote, I think was a very emotional one for her. But I think that she made and I know Tiana actually talked about this, that Caroline really made the right choice for her as far as the numbers are concerned. But still, that doesn't make it any easier when you have to make these decisions and this is what you're left with, because then it really becomes obvious where your loyalties were, and you can't necessarily keep them a secret. Like, I think now it's going to be a little bit blown up for
Yeah.
everyone how connected certain people are, even though before they might not have known that.
Yes. Yes. Now I do want to return once more for a moment to the TK vote, because I mentioned that Tiana knew the only options were voting TK out or going to Rocks. But as we also just discussed, she was unaware of how solid Gabe, Sue, and Caroline were.
Mm.
And I feel like we're missing something here, because if those three were tight enough to go to Rocks, how did she not see that they were operating as a unit?
Mm.
I think the only possible answer is that Caroline and Sue did some good work to convince her that they were just using Gabe at the time. But
That
I mean,
makes sense.
that's the only thing. Yeah, exactly. That's the only thing that makes sense to me.
Well, because I do again have to give credit to Sue and Caroline
Mm-hmm.
for playing people the way that they were. They really were saying the things they needed to say to make Tiana feel a particular way
Yes.
while keeping Gabe in the position that they needed to keep him in. And so they're doing a really great job at maintaining the relationships in a way that will benefit themselves, not necessarily benefit the other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would imagine that there was probably some of that going on in order to downplay any relationship that they might have with Gabe. Like, listen, Tiana, we're just doing this because we have to, in order to make
Right.
Gabe feel like this is going to be okay. Because really, yes, that's a great point. It doesn't make any sense otherwise.
Yeah. Now, I do want to also address the revelation that came from Tiana telling Mike Bloom that Rachel actually told her about the advantage shortly before Tribal Council.
Right?
Now, yeah, of course, there was essentially no time to do anything with this information unless she decided to bring it up in Tribal Council itself. She told Mike that she sometimes wished she could go, that she would have told Kyle and Caroline so they could plan a vote against Gabe. But she also recognizes now that Caroline and Sue were so tight with Gabe anyway. And I think I think she's arrived at the right answer there in that last part. There really is nothing that she could have done, even with that information. She wasn't
Right.
going to change Caroline and Sue's votes.
Well, and even if she had told everyone about this advantage, the
Mm-hmm.
way that the advantage worked, there was nothing that could be done
Right.
anyway
Right.
because Rachel's literally leaving.
Yeah.
She's just walking out the door. So, and I know they didn't know. I don't think she told Tiana what the advantage was. So, if Tiana had decided during tribal council to say, "Hey, by the way, not for nothing, but this is what Rachel told me immediately before we came into
Mm-hmm.
tribal council," would Rachel have said, "Yeah, actually, that's true, and here it is. Like,
Yeah.
I'm leaving, bye." So
Yeah.
we still would have been in the same situation, and
Right.
she could have said, "And Tiana just tried to throw me under the bus." So be mindful of that, everyone, if you want to play
Yes.
with Tiana. Certainly wouldn't have made Tiana look good.
No. No. All right. Well, we can move to the second rule, which says not to scheme and plot too much and to keep your scheming secret. And Tiana had some problems here. Primarily, the issue was that once Tiana realized Gabe wanted her out, and she therefore wanted the same for him, she went about handling it in a way that was almost guaranteed to draw negative attention to herself.
Mm,
And of course, I'm mostly talking about her going to the mixed tribe social hour reward and
yeah,
throwing Gabe under the bus.
way under the bus.
Yes. Now, Tiana said in her interviews that she talked to everyone about wanting Gabe out so people would know she could be used as a number and that they shouldn't target the Tuku tribe in general because they were not a unified unit. Tiana even anticipated our criticism of that move by telling Mike Bloom, a lot of people were like, oh, that was too big of a move too soon. I'm like, honestly, I should have doubled down on it even more. Uh, but no, sorry, Tiana. It was too big of a move too soon.
But no.
Yeah, but no.
Well, and I do think that there is this is a good point to just kind of underline, emphasize, italicize, put in bold. When you have these little like gatherings, let other people talk if they want it. Like,
Mhm.
there's no reason to offer up so much information because we've seen it time and time again. Then you become the topic of discussion amongst everyone else because when those people who are at that reward or at that thing come back together, then they're like, so what y'all talk about? Oh, you should have
Mhm.
heard what Tiana was saying back there. I mean, it's like, and so you end up getting thrown under the bus because you're trying to throw someone else under the bus, but
Right.
it's not going to work the way that you necessarily want it to. There's a way to plant seeds, and then there's a way to just overdo it, and if she had really doubled down, it would have been even worse for her.
Yeah. I mean, it couldn't have been worse. But yes.
But at that moment, it could
Right.
have been.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, now, I mean, I do want to acknowledge that when she tried to throw Gabe under the bus that way, she was under the misconception that we talked about already that other members of her tribe, specifically Caroline and Sue, were on her side.
Sure,
So that makes some of the things she did, which we were like, how could you do that in front of Sue and Caroline? It's at least more understandable with
sure.
her
Yeah.
believing they were on her side.
Mhm.
But it was still a problem for all the reasons you just gave. Because
Mm,
even if you fully trust everyone on your tribe who was there, you're giving away information to other players from other tribes who don't know you and who
right.
you don't really know. And you're trusting that they won't use it against you.
Yeah, and you are showing that you can't necessarily be that loyal if you're willing to throw your people under the bus immediately.
She wasn't trying to show, she was trying to show the opposite, as a matter of fact. She
Well,
was
she was trying
trying
to
to
gain
show,
favor with them.
well, she was trying to show there are cracks here. Let me help you break those cracks.
Sure, but you're providing the information to
Mhm.
essentially what is at that point the enemy, right? Like
Yes.
these are people that you haven't worked with yet, you don't know yet. And you're like, here's all of this information. But at the same time, what you're doing by revealing that information is you are showing yourself to be a crack and not necessarily just Gabe. You know, it's like,
Right.
oh, so maybe Tiana is the issue and it's not Gabe because
Mhm.
she's here saying all of these things about Gabe. And so they might question their ability to even work with you moving forward. Because my gosh, if she's willing to throw her own people under the bus, knowing us for 5 seconds, what's she going to do 4 days from now,
Right.
5 days from now, when we actually decide we wanna try to work with her, she might throw us under the bus, and so you end up creating more issue for yourself because you don't come across the way that you're hoping to come across, and we've seen that it happened to Rome, and I realize Rome is different than Tiana, but, you know, it happened to Kyle, like, people are sharing information, and
Yes.
then immediately, the person that they were talking about finds out what they said, and then it turns into a whole thing. It's just not it's not a good look, it's not a good way to be when you are just meeting people. It's just because you don't know them enough to
Right.
understand what their response is going to be.
Right. Exactly. And, she talked about wanting to double down. And it looks like that's what she was going for because even as she was preparing for this tribal council, she wanted to still declare herself open for business because she said in interviews that if Rachel had still been there, she would have voted for Gabe, even knowing that everyone else was going to vote for Rachel,
Right.
just to show, hey, look, I'm still here. I'm still the crack, you know. And
If you need
again,
to vote someone out, it can be me.
yeah, well, I mean, I understand, again, wanting to show you can be picked up as a number. But in doing so, she didn't seem to consider, well, there were two things she didn't seem to consider. One, everything that you just said.
Mm,
And two, she was also showing all of the Tuku that she was turning on them.
right.
That's four other
4.
players.
Right.
You'd better be damn sure you have the majority if you're dumping all your allies like that. And she wasn't, she was just looking for someone new.
Mhm.
She
Yeah.
assumed that three of those allies would jump with her, even though
Mhm.
she had advertised that she wasn't with them. And now compare this with someone like Andy, who now knows that the other Gata don't fully have his back. but he's
Mm,
not out there advertising he wants to turn on them.
right.
He is secretly and slowly building numbers while also still maintaining apparently friendly relationships with them.
And that is what you really need to do is what is it? Keep your scheming secret. And
Yes.
and you want to keep the people who are like your enemies close, right? And so Andy really is taking that information, tucking it away, saying, okay, this is something I might need to deal with later. But for now, we're going to let it be until I need to actually work on this. And he's also letting other people approach him, which is also the better play, right? Because then you are the recipient of information as opposed to the giver
Right.
of information. And so then you can respond to it however you think is going to be best for your own game. If you want to throw somebody under the bus because they came to you with information, or if you say, well, this is beneficial to me and something that I might want to
Mhm.
consider in my game working with this person. So he's definitely in a much better spot than Tiana ever was in regards to how she was dealing with being a potential crack.
Yes. Yes.
I love that we're calling her a crack.
Yeah, well, I mean, she basically,
I
she kept
know.
calling, using that term. So, all right, well, we could go to the third rule, which tells players to be flexible. How do you think Tiana did in terms of this rule?
I don't think she did well. And I say that because she got so fixated on Gabe and really wanting to remove him from the game, it became kind of like her center. And I don't think it helped her in rebuilding the relationship with him. And I know Gabe felt similarly about her
Hmm.
as well. So that does make it very problematic. But she really seemed very focused on Gabe. And then she also, I think, really it's interesting that she was considering wanting to work with the women, which you would think, okay, well, she's being flexible because she's keeping her options open. And I do tend to lean that way. But at the same time, I feel like her reasons for wanting to do it were not necessarily, this is the best thing for my game. I think it was more like, this is going to help solidify my also getting rid of Gabe. Everything seemed very like Gabe focused, right? And I'm just I feel like that affected her ability to really make the choices that she needed to be making to further her game because she was so focused on Gabe.
Yeah, because I agree with everything you said. The only thing I have to add is on one hand, opening up yourself for business in such an obvious manner could be seen as being very flexible.
Sure.
But as we discussed, it also put a wall between her and the other Tuku.
Mhm.
And a wall, of course, is the opposite of flexible.
Right. And it's
And,
like
you know,
working with Tiana came with an you also need to dislike Gabe. Like that was
yes,
like you got to be like, "Okay, I'm going to work with you, but Gabe. We're going to work
yeah,
together, but Gabe. You
right.
and I, Gabe." It's like that became like everything that she wanted was a Gabe vote.
Yes, yes. All right, then we could go to the fourth rule, which tells players not to let their emotions control them. Now, this was an area where we can applaud Tiana because
Mm,
she even said back in episode 2, when I came out here, I knew that I wanted to be a player that separated emotion from gameplay. I could not like you, but I could work with you. Now, of course, when she said that, she was debating whether or not to keep TK. And some people said that after talking about it, she immediately went against it.
mm,
In our Why TK Lost podcast, I defended her because she had said she didn't want to work with someone who disrespected her. And while she ascribed that to emotion, I thought that it went beyond that because someone who disrespects you also isn't going to take you seriously in the game. Now, since
mm,
then, and especially, for her upon rewatching it, she thinks she had a bit of a misread on him in terms of like whether there was actual disrespect there. And I'm also
mm.
sure that, the two of them talking in Ponderosa helped that as well. Uh,
Sure.
but as we discussed earlier, none of that really mattered because her choices were limited to vote out TK, go to Rocks. Her emotions really didn't matter in that vote.
Yeah. And I do think that she tried to put her feelings aside
Mm-hmm.
regarding Gabe for a moment when she apologized to him as well.
There's some
It
big honking air quotes about
I
apologizing
I
there.
said it
Mm,
slowly on
yes.
purpose
Yeah.
because it was an apology, as you
Mm.
know, yes, it wasn't much of an apology, but she attempted an apology. He also attempted a was it a hug? Who did he hug? And then ended up
No, that
like
was Rachel.
it was Rachel, yes, and then made the eyes at the
Gave the
camera,
look.
so
Yes.
yes.
Yes, I will obviously be having a video
So
of that too.
meaningful.
Yes. Um, yeah, I mean, when it does come to Gabe, well, you could say that it was an emotional reaction to always
Mm,
want Gabe out.
right.
But it's also a logical, strategic reaction. Maybe not to be as focused as she was, which you have
Yeah,
highlighted.
yeah,
Um, and she, we already talked that she didn't go about it in the right way. But I don't think the general idea of doing it was based in emotion per se.
yeah, no, I agree. I think there was definitely a focus on Gabe, and I think it was and we've seen players do this. You wanna put my name down? Well, now I'm coming for you, and
Right.
it's almost like there's, like, a revenge component,
Mhm.
and it's like, "I gotta get you before you get me." I've been there, I understand what it feels like. So,
I
I
mean,
don't
Jam
think that she
Jam's
was
whole game was based on that. So,
right,
you know,
yeah, so, this is what people do, and so
right.
I don't know if it necessarily is emotion, it's more like, I have to protect myself because that person wants me to be voted out, that's a threat to me, so I have to try to make sure I take that person out.
Yes.
But you need to go about it in kind of a quieter
Yeah.
fashion.
Yeah. All right. Well, we can go to the fifth rule, which reminds players they need to pretend to be nice and play the social game. Generally speaking, I think Tiana got along with people.
Mhm.
Though, she mentioned in her interviews that one reason she wasn't really down to work with Gabe was they just didn't click for whatever reason. And, that happens. That's, you know, where pretending to be nice comes into play.
Yeah.
Um, and of course, we saw that when she was basically pushed into the big honkin' air quote apology to him for
Mhm.
throwing him under the bus, she didn't do a great job.
Yeah.
In large part, probably because she didn't feel like she had anything to apologize for. That said, I don't really think it mattered either way because Gabe was already planning to target her. She was already planning to target him. So
Mhm.
it was like a play that they both put on,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it didn't affect the eventual outcome in any way.
Yeah. And I think for her, it wasn't that she wasn't being social and trying to form relationships. I think her biggest issue was that other people had just formed stronger bonds and closer bonds more quickly, and unfortunately, she just never had that. We've already talked about how she thought she had a really good
Mhm.
relationship with people, but she wasn't as close with certain individuals as they were with each other.
And I think more importantly, other people followed rule 4, just like she said.
Yeah.
She talked about Sue coming to her crying and, that she
Mhm.
would console her. And, she thought that she was really tight with her and Caroline.
Right.
And, all of that may have been perfectly true and valid and honest from both of their viewpoints, but it didn't
Mhm.
mean that they were going to stick with her for the game.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. Well, the sixth rule warns against being too much of a threat. For Tiana, I think we once again have a situation where she wasn't so much a general threat, but rather a threat specifically to one person, Gabe.
Mm. Gabe.
Yes,
There's that name again.
yes. He knew from Sue and Caroline that she was coming after him. There was an Entertainment Weekly secret scene of him being worried about a women's alliance. And of course, we know that she wanted to use a women's alliance to go after him, which, was likely relayed to him as well because she said that he had his two little birds spying on her at all
Well,
times.
she referenced that a lot.
Yes, she did. Um, and, uh, it's funny that she talks about these two little birds because I was going to save this till later, but next week, we will have Omer Zahir as our guest. And of
Mhm.
course, his love for birds is well known. So
Yes.
it would have been perfect to have him here talking about the little birds, but
Yes.
we'll have
Yes.
to see if there are any bird references next week. Um, anyway, uh, you know, Gabe told Kyle in that kind of live tribal council that they couldn't control Tiana, but he believes he can control the other two. Now, do I believe that's true? No, especially for Caroline. But it was more about his perception. And frankly, he was right that he couldn't control Tiana, and
Yeah.
she was gunning for him.
Yeah.
Her biggest problem was that he knew how much of a threat she was.
Yes, and I think this is really fascinating when other players determine I can't control this person the way that I want to, and then therefore this is someone that I can't play the game with. And Gabe was certainly someone who was very mindful of who he thought he could control, and that was Sue. And then Sue came with Caroline, and so there you are. Now he, as you know, his little birds, as you've talked
Mhm.
about, and as Tiana said so frequently. And I do think that it's really fascinating if you are unable to minimize yourself in that way and to act more like willing to set aside your I need to lead and I need to be in charge and you're not going to tell me what to do. If you're just like, oh, okay, and a little more agreeable, that you could find yourself in a better position, even though that's not necessarily where you want to be. But sometimes you don't want to be in the leader position because then you find yourself in a situation like Tiana, where someone like Gabe realizes very quickly she's not going to do what I want her to do.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, the seventh rule covers idols and advantages in game mechanics. Now, Tiana didn't have any idols or advantages of her own, but she certainly had some encounters related to them. Most recently, of course, was, as we mentioned already, Rachel telling her about the safety without power advantage. But like we said, a little while ago, there was really nothing she could have done about that anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Another interaction she had was that she said in interviews that she had, of course, figured out Sue had an idol due to the whole red paint incident.
Oh
But she
gosh.
also said at the time she thought Sue was on her side, so there wasn't any reason to call her out.
Mm,
And it really is interesting how many different possibilities get cut off when Tiana or any player is convinced they're in one situation when they're really not. We keep
yeah.
saying, well, she could have done this, but she believed that
Right.
Stu and Caroline were on her side. This was
Mm-hmm.
another situation of that. She could have called out, hey, this woman has an idol, but she didn't want to because she thought she was her ally when she never was.
But she could have had a conversation with Sue just to say, like, hey, Sue, listen, you and I are together. We're working together. Uh, Got to talk to you about this red paint thing. Because, and she could have done it from a I'm concerned
Mm-hmm.
like point of view, like other people have noticed, they found some things. I'm looking out for you, and just maybe kind of feel Sue out a little bit to because she doesn't know what Sue actually has. She just knows she has something
Right.
that would involve red paint. And like, yeah, and she just assumed, well, whatever it is, she's gonna work with me. But maybe check in, maybe find out, try to get some more information.
I agree. I also don't think it would have changed anything. And she
I
may
don't
have
think it
been
would
afraid it
have.
would have spooked Sue.
Yeah, and that's fair because she did say that Sue was very emotional at times,
Yeah.
and they were concerned with her. But
Hmm.
I don't know, there could have been a way to have that conversation that wouldn't necessarily have come across as a threatening
Hmm.
conversation. Everyone was talking about the red paint. I say everyone, a majority of
Right.
the tribe was talking about the red paint and the well, and then they found the pot and the whole,
Yeah.
and then Sue was very aware that that was happening. And I think that might have been a moment for Tiana to say, "Hey, listen, like I know what's going on, but we gotta
Hmm.
we gotta figure this out so that way we can minimize any issues that you're gonna have." It's possible. I don't know how Sue would have responded, but it might have been worth a shot.
Yeah. Oh, well, at this point, I mean, anything would have been worth a
Yeah,
shot.
sure. Hmm.
Um, Now, speaking of a shot, I have heard it suggested in a few places that Tiana should have played her shot in the dark. I think that there was a mention of it in the initial post-show podcast, and I've seen a couple people suggested on Twitter too. Um, Now, clearly, with the full knowledge that we have as viewers,
Mm,
yes, she should have. But we have to go back yet again to our discussion of how completely she was fooled. She had
Mhm.
no idea that Caroline was going to turn on her and even bring Kyle along. So why would she even think about playing it?
Right.
You know,
Yeah,
as
she thought for sure they were all gonna vote
right,
Gabe.
right. As she told Mike Bloom about Caroline, I thought that we were real ride or dies in that situation, but clearly
Mhm.
not.
Yeah.
I, there was just no reason for her, in her mind, to even consider the idea.
And she wanted to write Gabe's name down. I mean, come on.
Well,
She's
yes,
been
that's yeah,
waiting to do that for
yeah,
so long,
true,
to give up her opportunity.
yeah. Okay, let's move on to Appendix A, which is about the players keeping their end goals in mind when voting. And we talk about voting the weak, then the strong, then the weak, then the strong. But that didn't come into play in this one because alliances did, which is as it should be for players considering their own future. And the trio of Gabe, Caroline, and Sue have been ready to take out Tiana for a while now, if they had gone back to tribal council earlier.
Mm,
It turned out to be just like Gabe said, taking them back in time. And it made perfect sense for them to stick together here.
yeah.
Kyle's vote, seemed more surprising because we didn't see him get an indication from Caroline that she was voting Tiana out. I I I just figure that she must have told him, but it wasn't shown to keep us in suspense, and that's how he knew he had to join the crowd.
Yeah, and also at that point, you don't want to be the lone person going back to tribal council who
Well,
voted
right. Yeah.
differently. Yeah, so you gotta do what everybody else is doing at that point.
Unless you're Tiana, who
Well,
didn't
right.
want to do what everyone else was doing.
Right,
But yes.
right, right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as far as looking at, the actions of the other players, it takes me back to Caroline again because it seems like she has been playing the middle like this entire time.
Mhm.
Which was also probably the reason she pushed so hard to get rid of Rachel rather than force the war within Tuku. That's why she told Gabe, no, we want to go Rachel. She told Tiana, no, we want to go Rachel. And then
Mhm.
Rachel said, peace out. And, you know, Caroline was sitting there like, well, hell. Um, you know, um,
So
and
much for playing the middle.
yeah, and Tiana told Dalton Ross, I think for Caroline, it was more she was going to lose either two alliance members with Sue and Gabe if she voted Gabe out, and then Sue would have never trusted her again, versus me being one. And she may be right. It could just be a situation of numbers.
Mhm.
From what we saw, she really was much tighter with Sue and therefore Gabe. Caroline was. And we
Mm.
heard that also from TK way back in his interviews talking about Caroline and Sue. Now, of course, what we saw could be a skewed version based on knowing that this outcome was you know coming
Sure,
up.
sure. Mhm.
But with the TK thing and with other stuff that we saw, it at least seemed to me like the whole time Caroline was indeed closer to Sue and Gabe and just leading Tiana on.
Yeah. Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah. Now, if something had happened and Gabe had gotten knocked out or Sue had gotten knocked out some other way, she could have easily swung over with Tiana. But
Mhm.
she had a choice and she went with the
Yeah.
one she was closer with, I
And
think.
also right, and there's also more numbers
Right.
with the choice that she made.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, it is about time to wrap things up. So, what are your final thoughts on Tiana?
Well, I think Tiana actually kind of, not that she knew what was going to be her biggest problem in this game, but she knew what was gonna be her biggest problem in this game because she talked about it in her pregame press that her strongest ability is also going to be her kryptonite, and that's her personality, that she had a really strong personality. And I do think that that's what we saw end up happening here. We talked about the fact that Gabe recognized early on that he was not going to be able to control her. TK got frustrated with Tiana even though they wanted to all work together, and it was because Tiana was strong and was willing to stand up for herself and wanting to have a bit of a voice, which unfortunately sometimes in Survivor you can't always have because you put yourself front and center and it makes people question whether or not they can work with you. You talked about Caroline being in the middle, and Caroline is finding that sweet spot where
Mm-hmm.
she's no
Sweet
one's really
Caroline. Oh, oh,
that's
oh.
right. Oh, look at that. You know, no one's suspecting it. They might now because they've seen what happened at this tribal council. But, and Gabe, even though Gabe has a personality, he's at least hiding portions and parts of that because people have no idea he's that close with Sue. And so there's unfortunately, I think, an issue for Tiana, and that was maintaining that part of herself and trying to minimize that part of herself. She needed to do that more because I do think that she clearly has something about her that people notice immediately. She was the alternate last season, and she was someone who people talked a lot about in their pregame press because they noticed her. There was something about her. And the same thing happened in this pregame press as well. There's just something about her personality that just she exudes something, and she probably exudes confidence. And confidence can be very, very intimidating to people, especially when you're playing a game like Survivor. And so I want to sit here and say it was the damn disadvantage that caused Tiana to go home. I do think that that was unfortunately a component of her game, but because we got to see her original tribe come back together and all of those components of that original tribe come back together. Unfortunately, Tiana found herself on the outs of her original tribe, and her original tribe was left to vote for her in this situation, albeit with a disadvantage attached to it. And she ended up being on the receiving end of the tribe's vote, which was her tribe. So,
Yes. Yeah, as I said earlier, I was definitely unhappy with the way production made 2/3 of the players immune in this episode. And if there had been a different result of someone getting totally screwed, I would have been really pissed. But the weird randomness of the situation, with a less than 0.9% chance of happening, took us back to a Tuku Tribal Council. So rather than saying the twists took out Tiana, my annoyance is tempered a bit because I can truly say it was gameplay. Of course, this doesn't help Tiana one bit. But as Gabe said to Jeff after the tribal council scramble, we all have relationships. Survivor is a game of relationships, and you got to trust them. Gabe trusted his, Tiana trusted her, and believed she was in a good spot. Only one of them was right. Several times throughout our discussion, you've heard me say, Tiana didn't do X because she thought Caroline and or Sue were on her side. I mentioned earlier that she said in her final words that she was bamboozled, and she really was. Many different avenues she could have tried were cut off because she thought she was solid with an alliance, but in fact, the other alliance against her was the one that was more solid. Because of that, she felt comfortable throwing Gabe under the bus to the other tribes during the social hour. She openly shared information about her plans with Caroline. She believed everyone on the tribe was against Gabe. She didn't tell others about Sue's idol to make her a potential target. She didn't play her shot in the dark, and so on. Some of these still weren't great ideas, even if she had been in the position she believed herself to be, such as, when she announced she was basically open for business at the social hour. But almost all of it stemmed from having been fooled about who she could trust. The Survivor logo on your hat tells players to outwit, outplay, and outlast. Tiana's supposed allies on the Tuku tribe, particularly Caroline and Sue, did all three of those to her. And that is why Tiana lost.
see, my hat became a prop and everything. Look
That's
at
right. That's right.
that. Not just a Halloween costume.
That's right. All right. Well, before we get to our predictions for next episode, I
Oh,
want
goodness.
to again mention, something I kind of just threw in there that next week we are excited to be joined by Survivor 42's Omer Zahir, Dr. Omer
Yes.
Zahir. We're going to have two doctors in a row, one veterinary and one ER.
Mm.
So this we're getting to the medical portion of the Why Blank Lost season, apparently.
Love it.
Um, Also, I, of course, want to remind everyone that the rules we just discussed are available in both poster and t-shirt form. Again,
Mm-hmm.
go to robhaswebsite.com/yxlostfeed, scroll down and purchase to your heart's content.
Yes, buy it all. Oh goodness. Do you want me to talk about what are we doing predictions now?
No, first you have to tell people where they can find it.
Okay. I was distracted because I'm trying to figure out who I'm going to decide.
Ah,
So yes, you can certainly find me at Jessica Lewis 89 on Twitter. I'm also at Jessica Lewis 6789 on Instagram. I am not as socially out there putting myself on all types of platforms like Mr. David Bloomberg over here. He has very, very many places you can find him. He has a link tree that you can go to find all of the incredible content that he does post. And David, why don't you tell them where they can find you?
yeah, as you mentioned, I have a link tree. It's linktree/David Bloomberg with a dot before the EE in the URL. Or you can find me directly on Twitter and Blue Sky as at David Bloomberg, on Threads as at David Bloomberg TV. Um, I'm also on the video platforms YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram as at David Bloomberg TV. I've been posting 2 or 3 videos per day, uh, almost all on Survivor at this point, but with some in there on shows like the Traders Canada, the Summit, House of Villains, so you never know what you're going to get there. Speaking of the Traders Canada, I am also co-hosting the Tradar podcast for the Traders Canada season 2, and that's TRAIDAR if you want to find me there. So once people are looking for us there, can they find our predictions here? Are you ready to move into that?
God, you throw me off so much. I'm so torn with these predictions, okay? Because I do feel like it's almost like we have so many people that are just like outliers. Um, like Saul and Teeny are they together? I guess they are, but it's Andy and now Genevieve are like kind of getting together. Rachel is still kind of a bit of an outlier. But Sam and Sierra together. Kyle's kind of an outlier. I don't know. Ah, this is terrible. I think that what's going to happen is Kyle's going to get voted out.
Okay.
That's my prediction because Kyle keeps winning all of the immunity challenges, even though
I mean, even though he really didn't win this
he
one.
didn't. I
Yeah.
was just gonna say he was kind of like not the winner, but he still got
Yeah.
the necklace. And I mean he's very likable, but I don't feel like anyone's gonna fight for Kyle. I've said that
Mm.
before, and then he won immunity, but I just don't feel like he will necessarily have anyone that's gonna be like, we need to save Kyle. Whereas I feel like I could see other people having someone that's gonna come to bat and say like, no, maybe we should focus on someone else. No, I'm gonna pick Kyle. Sorry, Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying, but I also don't think anyone's going to fight to get rid of Kyle.
Well, and that's
Um,
true too, but when you need to
yeah,
pick someone.
right, right. Well, so first, let me say that the preview tells us the auction is back.
Yes.
Consider
Awesome.
considering the way this week went, I expect Jeff will be auctioning off immunity to the top 9 bidders. Um,
That's incredible.
Yeah. Now, more seriously, I am hoping Jeff fixed the dumb things they did to the auction last time they brought it back
Yeah.
a couple seasons ago, because that wasn't even an auction. It was a ridiculous race to spend money. And
Yeah.
I also hope he doesn't find a new way to screw it up, even though I know he probably will. But
They should bring the milkshakes back. Do you remember that? It
did they
wasn't
bring all the
milkshake.
boys to the yard? Is that?
No.
The
It was like
gross food milkshake.
yeah,
Oh,
you spun the
yeah,
thing and like it was two different and then he would make a shake
yes,
for oh god.
yeah. No one's gonna bid in an auction for that. Uh,
Just saying, that's
a
just another
real
idea.
milkshake, yes, but not that.
Not that, not
Um,
that.
Now the thing is, an auction doesn't really tell us much of anything about what will happen.
Mm-mm.
What we did see is that Sierra said she wants to knock out Tuku, while Andy is looking to change his fate and gives a high five to Caroline. Now, we know Andy wants to flip things. And as I said much earlier, I do think he and Genevieve will do that. The question is whether it starts now. Could those two talk to some Tuku people about the Gata Lavo plan to target them? I'm going to go out on a limb and say yes. I think the first strike comes this week. And I
Oh,
think Sierra is going to be the casualty.
you think so?
Yes. Now, I am
Mm,
by no means as certain about it as I was about Tiana going this past week, but we'll see what happens.
fascinating. Well, maybe your streak will continue.
We'll see. We'll see.
Fascinating. All right, well,
Yeah.
I'll be wrong again.
Well, I know. I know.
Yeah, I know. Look at you.
Took her a couple seconds to get that
You
one
may
there. Yeah.
You're so kind. Oh, David.
Yes.
All right, what are we doing now?
Well, as we wrap up, I want to encourage people to check out the RHAP patron program at robhasawebsite.com/patron. Of course, you get access to all of the special podcasts that are put out just for patrons, plus patron discounts to like the New York show that was a couple weeks ago, the Houston show that's coming up, and you get the Facebook groups and Discord. And you get to support shows like ours and everything on the network. So again, go to robhasawebsite.com/patron. And also make sure that you're subscribed to all the RHAP Survivor podcasts by going to the website weknowsurvivor.com. It's right there, right down
Right
there.
there.
See?
Right there.
You'll get to select your podcast service of choice, and then all the different Survivor podcasts will be streamed to you, from the Know-It-Alls, the B&B, Survivor International, us, obviously, and, everything important, the interviews, it'll all be sent directly to you. So go ahead and do that.
Yes, and we would like to thank everyone at RHAP, especially Scott St. Pierre and Jessica Sterling, for all of the producing, editing, putting together all of the incredible content that you create. We also want to thank Doug, who does all of the beautiful art that you see. So thank you so much for all of the work from everyone who is at the staff on RHAP. You've done incredible work providing all of the content that David just spoke of. So thank you so much for all of the support that you provide podcasters. And thank you to all of the listeners who provide support for podcasters. So thank you so much for listening. It's been another week of David telling everyone why he is right, why Jessica was wrong. It's
Right
okay.
there. It's right there. Right there.
I know. We know. We understand. Whatever makes you feel good, David.
Well, yes, obviously. Yes. Thank you, as always, Jessica, for another great week, for allowing me to point out that I was right.
Mhm.
And, as we discussed earlier, Dr. Omer Zahir will be joining us next week. So we will see everyone then. Bye.
Bye.